everybody. Lord Tremendous here. Got another book review here for you. This one is a book called Empire of the Goddess, and it is by a man named Matthew Warner. He reached out to me, I believe, through Reddit and asked me to check out his book, and I'm very glad that he did. It is 315 pages long. It was published on the 4th of July, 2019, and it is under the genres of contemporary fantasy fiction, U.S. horror fiction, and alternative history. Although, honestly, I don't know why it would be under U.S. horror fiction. Contemporary, I could see. And alternate history, kind of. I see it more as a dystopian fantasy type of book. Anyway, I got it on Kindle Unlimited with my subscription, but you can get it on ebook for $2.99, audiobook for $7.49, and paperback for $9.99. And I cannot encourage you enough to do so because this book is amazing. Mr. Warner has written a lot of books. He's got 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12 available on Amazon right now, although I've only read the one. And if you look at his About page, he has been writing for a long time and has a lot of stuff out there. And I think he even does screenplays. So this guy knows what he's doing, and it is super obvious in his work because this book is amazing. Non-spoiler. And I really, really want to encourage you to read this book because it's so good. So if you do go into the spoiler section of this review, please know that you're disappointing the goddess because this book works so much better if you go into it not knowing what's happening. So please, just after the non-spoiler section, just shut it off, just shut it off and go get this book. It's not expensive. It's on audiobook. I did not listen to the audiobook. I don't know how good the narration is or anything like that, but the story is phenomenal. Non-spoiler, a guy named Thomas Dillon is he's I don't want to say middle age, like 30s, late 30s, somewhere near mid to late 30s. Virginia guy. This is current time and everything like that. And he's got a 4-year-old son. His son runs outside to cut the grass with scissors. Is real excited to help dad. Dad's like watching him. He kind of goes around the side of the house. Dad starts following after him, and he sees kind of like a heat wave, like the optical illusion thing that you see in when it's really hot out. He gets like some goosebumps, and his son's gone, right? And they don't find him. He's just gone. About a year goes by. His marriage falls apart. He falls apart. He gets fat. He gets alcoholic. He gets destitute. He gets sad because he can't find his kid. People look for him. The author paints the picture as morose as it should be. He lost his kid. And a year or so goes by. Becomes suicidal and everything. And it's interesting, though. Like, the story kind of draws you in the way he paints this whole picture here. And then next thing you know, it's been a year. He's failed to kill himself because, honestly, he's a coward. And the author doesn't try to paint this guy as any kind of superhero or anything like that. It's so real. Anyway, on the anniversary of his son's disappearance, he's back over by the house where he disappeared, and that same heat shimmer shows up, and the tingles happen, and he goes after it and ends up in a dystopian version of Earth. He's in America still. He's still in Virginia, only it's not called Virginia. Earth is not called Earth. It's called Terran, and it's kind of like our Earth, only not. There's a lot of differences, including the ruling government. Basically, the patriots or the priests of the patriots or something like that. And they're like the worst parts of religion. It's and the author does an excellent job of making you hate these people. He really does. Remember that for when I get into the spoilers, right? So he encounters a bunch of people, a bunch of amazing things happen, and the story grows, the character grows, the author takes chances that pay off huge. He's not afraid of doing a lot of things that a lot of authors would shy away from, and it's wonderful. It is absolutely wonderful. I'm being vague on purpose because I do not want to spoil anything, because this book is best read from ignorance, from not knowing what's coming. So honestly, I'm going to cut the non-spoiler side short and just say go read the book. The link is 120% in the description. Go check it out. It is 5,000% worth it. 5 out of 5 stars. The editing is good. There were so few errors in this. Like, there were no spelling errors and no punctuation that I saw. There was a couple of misused words. Instead of shack, he used shark. Instead of it was they. And that happened like less than 5 times in this entire 315-page masterpiece. I loved this story. And so, yes, 5 out of 5 stars. Go check it out. I'm going to play an ad. I'm going to get into the spoiler section, and honestly, I hope you don't listen to the spoilers until after you've read the book. Buckle up. All right, in case you guys didn't already know, I am a self-published author, which is why I'm so passionate about self-published books. It's available on Amazon.com and Paperback, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited. If you're interested, the link's in the description. I'd really appreciate it. Checked out, left a review. So get ready, spoilers are coming up next, so if you're still here and the music stops, it's your fault. All right, you're still here, but again, please, 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 before you listen to this part, go read this book. It is worth every last moment of the time that you'll spend on it. Okay, so you're still here, so you either read the book or you're like, screw you, LT, I want to know what happens. So here it is. Like I said, the book starts off, and this guy, Thomas Dillon, the main character, is a web designer, computer programmer type of guy. His wife, he's married to his wife, Natalie. They've got a 4-year-old son named Walter. And, it's your typical, family, mom, dad, son. They go about doing their thing. And he's out there mowing the backyard, and his son wants to come out and help him. Totally normal. Son goes to help him out, and a heat shimmer happens. Dad gets some tingles, and the son disappears. For the next year, they're working on finding him, trying everything they can. Thomas does not handle it well. No fault, but the author doesn't, he's not some sort of rock for his wife. He's not some sort of, superhero. He does not rise to the occasion at all in any way, shape, or form. He becomes depressed. He becomes alcoholic. He becomes suicidal. He lashes out at his wife. And the character knows all this. At no point does the character try to make excuses. He knows he's a miserable human being, but he's sad. He misses his kid. He feels responsible, and understandably. Eventually, his wife leaves him. He loses a bunch of money, maxes out his credit cards, and he's in a slump. He's rough. The media kind of turns against him and stuff. He's becoming more and more bitter. He's getting fat. It's all the bad things. And just as he's starting to get his life back together, the 1-year anniversary pops up of it when his son was disappeared, and so he just happens to be in that spot, kind of reminiscing. He's been drinking, and he sees the heat shimmer again. He gets the tingles, so he chases after the shimmer and the tingles, and he ends up in this field with a bunch of clovers and everything like that. There's a lot of fog. He has no idea where he's at. When a minute ago he was in his subdivision, and all of a sudden these people come out of the fog, and they're dressed up in pseudo KKK outfits. I know, the white robes, the hooded faces and stuff like that. It's not a KKK outfit, but that's what he thinks it is at first. They also have cattle prods, and he's like, what's going on? He runs into this lady who's in a jogging outfit and has MP3 player buds in, and she's running away from one of the KKK guys, and he's trying to figure out what's going on, and he gets tagged, and it hurts. Basically, they get herded into this train. I know, a lot of parallels there. Get used to that when you're reading this book. And they get thrown on this train, and they get shunted off, just in a cattle car. There's hundreds of people in this cattle car, and they're miserable, they're upset, they're sad, but the people that herded him in there aren't around. They're just stuck in this train car until they get where they're going. They're in this car for hours, and when it opens up, he gets out, and they all kind of funnel out, and a couple of them kind of mouth off and get zapped again. One gets his arm broke, and they end up in this Washington, in basically the Washington, D.C. They see the Washington Monument and everything like that, only it's 3 times bigger and red, and there's people hanging all over it with stuff like spy and traitor and heretic, hanging around their necks, and they're in various degrees of dying. So he's like, okay, this isn't Kansas anymore. What is going on? He's kind of made friends with the lady jogger who turns out to be a girl named Lily from LA, who's a real estate seller person. She's basically a real estate agent, and she's 10 years younger than he is, very attractive, blah, blah, blah. She's the love interest. And that's fine because the author does the romance very well between them, in my opinion. Although she is a tease, but I'll get to that. So anyway, they end up stuck in this holding cell, all of them. They're all basically just stuck in this gymnasium type of thing with one way in, one way out. He gets taken out where he's forced to and that night and forced to have sex with one of the local women. She's not ugly, she's not attractive, she pays to have him, have sex with her, and he has to. She puts a drug in him. He doesn't have a choice. Kind of an icky part, definitely, but there's a purpose behind it that you find out at the end of the book. So I'll get to that. So anyway, the next day pops up. He's upset. He's not doing well with what he had to do that night. The girl Lily's trying to help him out through it, stuff like that. She tells him at one point, Thomas, I have a boyfriend, back in LA, and I'm loyal to him, but right now I don't care. I'm scared to death. So they kind of bond, but there's no real romance or anything there, but the seeds are planted type of stuff, So they get going to the next day, and they're all basically shunted out of this holding area where they're put on display for a bunch of just like lepers. All these people are around them, like this swarm of humanity, and they're all dressed kind of funky, and they've all got something wrong with them. Some are lepers, some have hives, some have missing limbs, some have weird mutations. They're all like really sick people, and they're paying a ton of money in order to buy these tickets, right? It's basically they're being raffled off. So our main character gets raffled off to this woman he thinks of as the Invisible Woman because she's all wrapped up from head to toe in like a trench coat and a hat. The only thing, goggles, face mask, gloves. He doesn't see a shred of her skin, so he's like, what is going on? They go up to the Washington Monument, where it basically has a sacrificial altar, a bunch of them up there, and he gets brought up there. The guy before him is this old man, right? And he gets chained down to this little hole in the ground. And behind him is the guy that won him. Basically, they raffled off his number, and one of the lepers or whatever got this old man and was kneeling in front of him praying to the goddess. And there's another guy behind the earthling, the dude that's shackled, the old man. He's shackled to the ground. He's like, what's going on? What are you doing to me? And there's a guy behind him, an executioner, with this scythe thing, and just drives it through his chest. Well, when dude gets stabbed through the chest with the scythe, this yellow burst of light comes out of him and heals the leper of it. Like, he's fine, he's healthy, he's good to go, nothing's wrong with him anymore. The old man is dead, but they just throw him into the garbage chute and get ready to do it to our main character, Thomas, right? Well, Thomas has a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training. That was how he worked out back when he was, still a dad and all this stuff, and still, gave a crap. So he tries to attack one of the guards, and this is where I really, really started to think that the author was good, because while the story had caught my attention, okay, great. Now Thomas is going to be a Luke Skywalker, a Mary Sue, or something like that. Nope. The guard is a guard for a reason. He was ready for him, blocked his kick, knocked him down, and zapped him with a cattle prod. And the greatest part about it was the guy Thomas is like, yep, that's right, I'm fat, out of practice, and this guy does this for a living. What a stupid thing for me to do. I thought that was amazing. The author isn't making his guy Chuck Norris. Amazing. So, anyway, he's about to get sacrificed for the Invisible Woman, and all hell breaks loose. The rebel scum, or whatever they are, that aren't all for the KKK guys, start. They're not KKK, by the way. They're priests of patriotism, basically. Not racist, because there's all different races underneath the hoods. That's just their garb. It's basically an excellent visual to make you hate them right away. It's very smart. There's at no point where you ever like one of the KKK robed individuals. So anyway, all hell breaks loose, and Thomas is able to get away. But first, before he makes his escape, he runs over and saves Lily, who was about to be sacrificed as well. They both get away. They get off the altar. They're running around in a crowd of people that are panicking when this guy sees him and is like, "Oh, you're Earthlings. Come on, this way, quick." He's like, "Whoa, Earthlings. That's a weird thing to call me, but whatever. Let's GTFO." So they jump in this guy's car. The invisible woman that bought Thomas or whatever jumps in the car with them. She was one of the rebels, right? So they take off to the safe house or whatever, because this was all a planned attack to rescue the Earthlings and try to stop the sacrifices and stuff, because not everybody agrees with the priest patriotism people, the government. They get there though, and the attack was a total failure. The only people to make it back were the two people, the driver, the invisible woman, and Thomas and Lily. The people waiting for him back at the safe house is the ringleader Andrew, and his buddy Duncan or whatever, or Simon, who's just a wise ass. And he kind of explains to him, yeah, it's some wild stuff that's happened. I'm really sorry. He's upset because a whole bunch of his people just got killed or captured and are going to be killed, and they all die. The invisible woman is all upset. She ends up leaving because one of her boyfriend got captured, and the only time you see her again is when she's killed. And basically, everybody's starting to fall apart. But Andrew is a priest of patriotism or something like that. He was a former one that rebelled against them, and then he rebelled against the state, and he was the one to kind of set up this attack. He's also a cleric, not the Dungeons and Dragons kind where you're running around with a mace and shield and stuff like that, but a cleric in a way that he can use the goddess's power to heal you completely, and he does. The invisible woman was shot in the stomach and is gonna die. He digs the bullet out and heals her completely with a prayer. A lot of things like that. He makes food, complete portions of food out of scraps. So he has like a sliver of an apple or something like that. He makes a whole apple out of it. Later on, they're low on water. He makes more water. Yeah, he's got powers. A lot of them. It's quite impressive actually, but it brings a whole new aspect to the story, right? And you kind of get your mind blown a little bit. But that's what he tells me. Yeah, the goddess powers us and blah blah blah. Well, Andrew is part of a group that is basically rebelling against the government. He doesn't want people to have to. The whole country is basically, it's America, but they call it Amerigo, and the whole country is kind of blocked off and everything, and being run by the priests because it's lucrative. People get sick all the time. They get horrible sicknesses, cancer, AIDS, herpes, you name it. They just get it. They don't do any of the fun stuff to get it. They just get it. And you find out later on it's because of that tear in the border that they came through. It's leaking basically toxic radiation fumes everywhere, causing people to get sick. But they don't call it sickness, they call it sin. And in order to get forgived, quote unquote, cured of your sin, you have to pay a healer like Andrew, or go to the raffles and have someone killed in order to heal you. Or if a healer does it, you have to pay them an exorbitant amount of money, at which point those healers have to give a vast majority of what they get paid to do it to the government or whatever. It's a racket, but it keeps them in power. It keeps everybody else under their thumb. It's a genius system that this author came up with, and it makes sense. There's no part of it where you're like, oh, I could pick at that and unravel it. No, it really, really is genius, because every once in a while, like you would suppose, somebody comes along and rebels, and they get murdered quite horribly by the government. All under legalities and stuff, sure, but yeah, they put down rebellions pretty hard. Anyway, so Thomas and Lily hang out, and eventually Thomas is able to convince Andrew, the cleric guy, that in order to get people to follow him and stuff like that, instead of charging to heal people, just do it for free. And the guy's like, well, how will we eat? How will we live? And he goes, they will, once people are cured of their horrible diseases and mutations and whatever maladies, they'll give you stuff. They will be quite grateful. And so the Andrew guy, he's a little bit of an arrogant prick. And he's like, you know what? Let me think about it. I don't know. That's kind of stupid. But then he decides to do it and it works. And it kind of goes to Andrew's head a lot. He starts walking around basically thinking that he's Jesus Christ incarnate. However, Jesus Christ doesn't exist in this world. This world's called Terran. It's called the Conquistador, and he doesn't call himself that, but he lets everybody else call him that, and they worship him in a way. This disgusts Thomas and Lily, and Thomas ends up leaving, and eventually Lily finds Thomas, and they come together in order to just try to make their way because Thomas is now convinced that Walter, his lost 4-year-old son, is in this world, right? So he's looking around for him. He's trying to figure stuff out, and then he realizes he has Andrew's powers. So does Lily. Not only does he have Andrew's powers to heal and create food, and let me tell you something, the whole like learning he's got powers and stuff and how he goes about figuring it all out is wonderful. It is genius. I loved every minute of that like discovery part of the book. But not only does he learn that he can heal people, like really easily heal people, and make food from scraps and everything, just like Andrew did, he can also control the weather. He can make water hot and cold. He can eventually walk on water. He can turn himself invisible. And he can put the diseases that he pulls out of people right back into them. Basically, he's got all the X-Men powers that he can think of. Lily has them as well, and she's also got this innate ability where she can see this smog, is what she calls it, coming out of the border areas where they first entered the world. Which is causing all the disease. So they get the idea to go to the border to close it, and stop not only the people being kidnapped from there, all the Earthlings coming there and being sacrificed for the yellow explosion, but to stop the horrible things that are happening here and stop the disease. Once all the diseases are cured, sure, people still get sick, but at a much slower rate because they find out through the internet that's on Terra that all the other continents, all the other empires around the planet don't have those sicknesses, don't get ill or anything like that. So yeah, they're like, they need to close this. We figured it out. So they go back to the border. They get back to the border and they're invisible and they're walking through. Well, a dog. Obviously, the border is patrolled by the priests, and while they can't see him, the dogs can smell him out. The dog attacks, mauls Thomas pretty good, and then he comes out of his invisibility because he loses concentration. He's about to get shot by a guard, and Lily dives in front of the gun. And Lily dies. Like, no kidding, she's killed. The author is not a coward. He's not worried, about, oh, I don't want to lose my characters. He straight up will kill a character. He's George R.R. Martin, Lily. She got blasted. The yellow burst comes out of her, heals Thomas of his wound, scares off the dog, and then Thomas uses all of his powers to end the guard that killed Lily, because at this point, they're very much in love. So he grabs her corpse, turns back invisible, and runs away. Just runs away. Because Thomas is a coward. He really is. And he admits it freely in this book. He knows he's a coward. So they get away from the border, never going there to try to close it or anything like that. And he gets in their car and he drives off and ends up swerving into a ditch, grabs her corpse, and starts desperately trying to bring her back to life. And he doesn't think it works. He feels awful. He's crying. He cries a lot. Thomas is a bit of a crybaby. But Lily comes back. Not like you think, though. She's all pale. The bullet wounds are still in her, but she's back, and she tells him she can read his thoughts. She's kind of serene. And the longer she only lasts about a day, and throughout that day, basically they go back to this quote-unquote holy site, and they make love, and then she kind of tells him, you need to go back to Washington where this all started at the monument, and there's where you'll find what you have to do. And he's like, what are you talking about? Well, she gives him the ability to see the smog, right? Well, it just so happens with that when he can see the smog, there's this green lightning bolt that comes from where Washington is at and lands over by where the border is, the barrier that they cross in order to come from Earth to Terra, where people are being kidnapped, right? So he's like, what do you want me to do? She goes, I want you to go and I want you to end all this. Do what we set out to do. The lightning is where you have to go to stop. She even kind of tells him what the afterlife is a little bit, which is pretty eerie. So it was interesting. But then she kind of fades into translucency. She gets really, really bright and kind of disappears into death. And she's dead. And yeah, Thomas mourns her again, but it felt real. It felt legit. And I love the fact that the author wasn't afraid to kill off a main character. That was brave. Most authors won't do that. So anyway, Thomas is determined now. He's depressed. He's sad. He's decided that his son Walter must have died here. Lily is dead. Andrew's about to be captured. He's got nothing else to do, so he's going to go and try to, what's it called? Give Lily her final wish, and shut down the lightning bolt that's coming from the Washington area. So it gets back to Washington just as just as Andrew shows up, and he's doing his full-blown conquistador routine. He's on a horse. He's got the Spanish helmet. He's walking in, he's martyring himself. He walks right up to the cops who shoot his horse with rubber bullets. The horse falls over. Andrew gets beat up a little bit and taken away. His followers kind of go, hey, leave him alone. The cops switch to real bullets and light the people up. Thomas watches all this happen, and he's like, damn, I wish I could do something for Andrew, even though he's kind of an arrogant prick, but he wants this. He's doing this to himself. I got bigger fish to fry. I got to shut down this lightning generator because that's what Lily wants. So he keeps himself invisible. He infiltrates the Washington Monument, and they're having a mock garbage trial for Andrew right off the bat. And that's where this high priest Cecil, basically the emperor of Amerigo, of this country that he's in, is there. And he's like this 23, 24-year-old, white boy, blonde-haired, blue-eyed prick, just real full of himself. Everything you would think he would be, right? And he, of course, they have the mock trial. He passes judgment of death on Andrew, and they hang him upside by his ankles for a few days until he dies. But before that, after he leaves, Thomas is still there. He watched the whole thing happen, and he's still invisible. And he's like, all right, I got to get up to this next tower. I got to get up there and see what's causing his lightning. And as he takes a few steps, somebody clears their throat behind him. Well, he's still invisible, right? So he turns around and looks, and it's that high priest Cecil, the emperor of this country that he's in. And he's like, oh, crap, because the emperor's looking right at him. And the emperor looks at him and goes, hi, Daddy, I've been waiting for you to get here. High priest Cecil is his long-lost son. This is a little interesting, but it turns out that the priest is his son. His son was chosen as the heir of the previous emperor because in order to have the superpowers that they have, you have to have Earthling DNA. And you can only get that DNA from an Earthling father, which gives you the powers. How crazy is that, right? So they have this reunion thing, and he's just kind of beside himself. It takes him a minute to really come to terms with everything, and then he uses his superpowers to check his son's DNA, and it's legit. His son's DNA is his DNA, and it's just crazy. But he finds out that his son is kind of a Hitler. He tries to convince his son. He's like, listen, there's no reason to kill these people. We can just heal them. Humans can do it. Earthlings can do it. But he's like, nope. They're from the lesser world that you call Earth, and they're literally just lambs for us to slaughter, to heal, and control the populace with. Now that you're here, though, we can open up more barriers, more borders, get more people from Earth here, sacrifice them even faster, and then we can take over the world. With you here, I can double my power, and that'll be great. Think of it, father and son ruling side by side, and just the only people lost will be Earthlings. And he's like, listen, you really don't need to kill them and to heal people anymore. Anybody can heal them. Any healer can heal them. There's no reason to do this. Stop. And so his son is like, you know what? I'll think about it. So he comes back, and his son thought about it, and instead of healing people, he just offs these people, because not only is it, they don't just kill these people to heal their people, they kill them as offerings to the goddess, right? So The guy realizes his son is lost. His son is just brainwashed to the point of Hitlerism. And he's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Well, his son takes him up to the top of the Washington Monument where the lightning bolts are coming from and shows him that he's the source of the lightning bolts. His son, while he doesn't believe that the border or what he's doing is making his people sick because he's a religious nut job, he's like, this is what I do, and I want you to learn how I do this because with your powers you can do it for me, so I can be in other places and we can go and do other things. It'll be wonderful. And that's when his father is like, I have to kill my son. I can't believe I got to do this in order to stop him. And he does. Well, he tries to. He gets him in, he wrestles around with him, fights him, and gets the upper hand. He gets him in a chokehold and knocks him out, but he doesn't have it in him to kill him. He just can't do it. So his son is, unconscious, and he uses his superpowers to keep him asleep whenever he starts stirring because he's just thinking, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Well, he starts realizing that he could see his son's DNA, and that's when he figures out that Earthling DNA is what gives you powers here. That you get them from your father, and your Earthling mother magnifies the powers. The longer you're on Terra, the longer that has to happen. For some reason, it doesn't happen on Earth. It doesn't really explain that, but it's fine. You can get there. Well, he's like, well, my son, I can take my DNA out of him, and if I do that, he won't have his powers anymore because he gets the power from the father's DNA, but the mother's DNA magnifies it. So if there's nothing to magnify, he doesn't have any powers. So he does that. He uses his powers to basically erase his DNA out of his son, erase the chromosomes that are his, which is about half of them. His son turns all red, like he's really badly sunburned, and instead of a yellow burst, a red burst comes out of him, which heals everybody in the country. Like the burst just heals everybody, but it leaves his son crippled from the neck down, and he's dying. Right, the healers still work, but he's dying, and so he leaves her. Thomas leaves his son there, and his dad. He's like, "Daddy, don't leave me," and stuff. And he's like, oh, "I'm the worst father on the planet. Oh, I suck." Understandable. He's kind of depressed, but he did it. He did what Lily wanted. He closed it sent a red lightning bolt to the barriers, which kind of closes them. And since only he and his son Cecil, the high priest, could open the barriers, there's nobody else on the planet other than Thomas, the main character, that can open the barriers back up to Earth. So the sacrifices are going to stop, the sickness is going to stop, and eventually the priests are going to lose power. Andrew is dead at this point, and he has been taken to a hospital way off in the George Washington Memorial Hospital or something like that. So, using his invisibility, he goes to that hospital because he wants to talk to Andrew because he's got a theory. And so he brings Andrew back, just like he did with Lily. And it's exhausting, but Andrew comes back and he's got all that serenity and the white skin and all that stuff. And he looks at Andrew and he goes, "Your father was an earthling, wasn't he?" And he's like, "Yep." He goes, "But your mother wasn't, was she?" And he goes, "No, she wasn't." Remember what I said in the very beginning of the spoilers? When Thomas first got to the planet, he was forced to have sex with one of the Terran women. She paid and injected him with Viagra basically and made him have sex with her. That's where the healers come from. There's 74,000 healers in this country when he got there. So that's why they only had a portion of what Thomas could do, because while their fathers were earthlings, their mothers were Terrans, and so their mother DNA wasn't magnifying the father earthling DNA. So they could make food, they could heal people, but that was it. It requires both the mother and father of Earth in order to have the superpowers that he and Lily had. So he finds and verifies that all through Andrew, and Andrew, of course, goes and does the resurrection thing as Conquistador, Jesus Christ, however you want to see it, and basically gives him the mumbo jumbo. Everything that happened was the goddess's will. You did wonderful, blah, blah, blah. So the only part of the book that I have a complaint about, and this is super nitpicky, I know, but after months of wandering around, kind of grieving, he crippled his son, he took his DNA out of him, basically ripped everything that was him out of his son in order to save Terran and Earth. But, that's little relief for him or at this point. Lily's dead. His wife back on Earth has left him. He's got nothing. and he's done with Terran. So he goes back to the border, which is no longer patrolled or anything like that because the priests are starting to lose power and interest because there's no point in keeping them there. The barriers are closed and nobody can open them again. So he opens the barrier just once, slips back inside, and goes back to Earth. My only issue here with him going back to Earth, not that it doesn't make sense, but it's just he was on Earth for a year. His son was in Terra for what he thought was a year, and 20 years passed. He goes back and he's right back. Like it's a week has passed since he's been gone. So really nothing bad has happened. I would have preferred to see it like, some more time had passed on Earth. Just have a little bit of a problem with that. I get it. I get it. Time moves faster, in Terra than it does on Earth, but it just feels like a week was too short. I could be wrong. I could very well be wrong, but that was my biggest concern. It's like only a week. He was gone for a while. Probably not 20 years, so I get it, but still, okay. And that's really it. He kind of goes back to his house, realizes only a week has passed. He kind of sits down by his computer and realizes he's got to. I don't know. It just kind of ends. He's sad. It's a sad ending, but it's a real ending. The whole book, all the characters, all the decisions, everything that happens, it's realistic. He has to be clever. He has to discover things. Nothing is just handed to him. Everything feels real. It's a struggle. It's a fight. And in the end, the things he had to sacrifice and the things he had to do in order to achieve his goal were horrible. I couldn't even imagine having to do that to somebody I loved, let alone a child. But, well, granted, he wasn't a child, but your child, even when they're in their 20s, still, this is the kid that he loved, for 4 years, and then, spent the worst year of his life searching for, and he was miserable, and he thought he was dead, only to discover he grew up to be Hitler. Religious Hitler, but Hitler nonetheless. It's so good. It's so good. I enjoyed every last page of this book. 5 out of 5 stars. I could not encourage you enough to go and read it if you haven't already. And if you have, go read it again. Go read it again. Of course, like I say all the time, I know I'm not the authority on these things. I know I could possibly be wrong. So please feel free in the comments section to agree with me, disagree with me, or anything in between. I'd love to have a discussion on this book. But that's it. That's going to do it for this review. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, feel free to put them in the comment section below, and I will get back to you as quick as I can. And as always, thanks.